The toughest was feeling that I could ever be trusted again, specifically by my children.
Born into a whirlwind of fame, scandal, and secrecy, Sean, Patty Duke's son, had grown up navigating love, loyalty, and curiosity, all while the world speculated. At the center of it all,
and that was a seminal moment in her life where she finally felt like there's a name for this experience I'm having, there's medicine, there's a wellness plan that you can have,
was his mother's high-profile, controversial fling with Desi Arnaz Junior. Add to that a brief 13-day marriage to Michael Tell, and the question of Sean's father became one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. However, after the DNA test, Patty Duke's son now finally knows his father. This is one story you just can't miss. Let's start from the very beginning. Hollywood stardom and early chaos. Patty Duke was 8 years old when Hollywood first noticed her. A small girl with wide eyes and a magnetic presence. By the time she was 16, she had achieved what most actors only dream of in a lifetime: an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker in 1963. The award made her the youngest winner in that category at the time, a distinction that placed immense pressure on a teenager still navigating the turbulence of adolescence. The attention demanded perfection, obedience, and constant performance, often at the cost of her personal development. From 1963 to 1966, Duke starred in The Patty Duke Show, playing identical cousins Patty and Kathy Lane. Millions of Americans tuned in weekly to watch her shift seamlessly between two contrasting personalities, bubbly and vivacious Patty, reserved and intellectual Kathy. The show was a commercial and critical success, cementing Duke's image as America's sweetheart. But behind the cameras, the bright laughter of the Lane cousins masked a far darker reality. Duke's childhood was tightly controlled by managers who dictated not only her schedule, but her image, her behavior, even her interactions with family. Reports later revealed that this environment bordered on abusive. Long workdays, relentless filming schedules, and the constant stress of maintaining a public persona that left little room for normal childhood experiences. The Hollywood machine that adored her often failed to see the cracks beneath the surface. Duke's early fame camouflaged deep-seated struggles that would only later be diagnosed as bipolar disorder. Mood swings began in adolescence. She could move from exuberant charm to unpredictable, sometimes destructive behavior in moments, a volatility that would later be traced to untreated mental health issues. For years, the industry simply labeled her as difficult or erratic, never probing deeper. The very gifts that brought her fame, her intensity, her energy, her creative brilliance, also made her vulnerable to the pressures of Hollywood's relentless pace. Living under the glare of fame, Duke's personal identity often felt subsumed by the characters she played and the expectations imposed upon her. Her family life was complicated. She grew up moving between homes, sometimes separated from her parents for filming, other times controlled by distant studio executives. By the time she entered her teenage years, the combination of relentless schedules, constant scrutiny, and the absence of a protective support system had already begun shaping a pattern of instability in her relationships and emotional life. This instability would have lasting consequences. The tangled web of relationships. By the late 1960s, Patty Duke's life was a whirlwind of film shoots, public appearances, and intensely scrutinized social outings. Hollywood's brightest child star had transitioned into a young woman whose personal life became as captivating to tabloids as her performances. Duke's romantic entanglements now drew more headlines than her acting. In 1970, she made a decision that stunned even by Hollywood standards. Patty Duke married Michael Tell, Tell, unlike the Hollywood figures orbiting Duke at the time, was not a public star, but a relatively low-profile music promoter and writer who existed on the edges of the entertainment industry rather than at its center. The ceremony itself was quiet, almost rushed, taking place during a period when Duke's personal life was already under intense media surveillance. At just 23 years old, she was not only a former child star trying to transition into adult roles, but also a young woman grappling with emotional instability later attributed to bipolar disorder, though at the time it remained undiagnosed and misunderstood. Against this backdrop, rumors of a possible pregnancy began circulating in Los Angeles entertainment circles, and the pressure to contain the narrative escalated rapidly. The marriage to Tell, which lasted exactly 13 days before being annulled, was widely interpreted as a strategic move rather than a romantic commitment. In an era when studio image still carried significant weight and public morality could make or break careers, an unwed pregnancy posed a serious reputational risk. Hollywood in the late 1960s and early 1970s was in transition, but for actresses, especially those with a wholesome public image like Duke, the expectations remained rigid. Tell himself would later describe the situation with a sense of disbelief, acknowledging how surreal and transactional it felt. By most accounts, their interaction before the marriage had been limited, making the union appear even more improvised in hindsight. The annulment, filed less than 2 weeks later, did not close the story. It did the exact opposite. Instead of silencing rumors, it intensified them. Following the brief and highly publicized marriage to Michael Tell, Patty Duke entered another relationship that would draw even greater attention from Hollywood observers. This time, her partner was Desi Arnaz Junior, the son of television icons Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. The timing and optics of the romance amplified its notoriety. Duke was in her late teens and early 20s, navigating a difficult transition from child stardom to adult identity, while Arnaz Jr. was barely out of adolescence himself. Critics and commentators questioned the maturity of the relationship and the pressures placed on two young figures already living under constant media attention. In Hollywood at the time, relationships involving prominent families were rarely treated as private matters, and this one became a fixture in gossip columns almost immediately. Paparazzi activity escalated quickly. Photographers tracked their movements across Los Angeles, capturing images that ranged from casual encounters at cafes to appearances at high-profile Sunset Strip gatherings where the city's entertainment elite mingled. Even ordinary outings became staged spectacles once published in magazines and newspapers. A simple dinner or brief walk could be reframed as a headline event, with speculation layered onto every image. The constant surveillance created an environment where privacy was effectively non-existent, and where every interaction between Duke and Arnaz Jr. was interpreted through the lens of public curiosity. But this bond, too, was not meant to last. Amid these high-profile flings, fate brought Duke into the orbit of John Astin, already known for his role as Gomez Addams in The Addams Family. Their first meeting carried the aura of inevitability. Astin, established in the entertainment industry, yet possessing a grounded private demeanor, contrasted sharply with Duke's life under constant scrutiny. Their connection was immediate and complex, intertwining affection with practical considerations. As Duke navigated the consequences of her prior relationships, Astin became a stabilizing force. The relationship evolved rapidly. By 1972, Duke had given birth to her son, Sean, and Astin legally adopted him, providing a paternal figure and cementing the union that had begun under tumultuous circumstances. The adoption was a formal acknowledgement that intertwined personal responsibility with the complexities of celebrity life. Duke's choice reflected a desire for stability, for a family structure amid chaos. Aston's presence allowed her to navigate motherhood with some protection from the media glare that had followed her every move. Birth of a son and a paternity mystery. February 25, 1971, arrived with the quiet hum of anticipation at a Los Angeles hospital, though for Patty Duke, it was anything but quiet. The birth of her son, Sean, was a milestone shadowed by uncertainty and unspoken questions. Duke, barely 20, had endured a whirlwind of relationships in the preceding years. And now the question of Sean's biological father lingered like a storm cloud over the nursery. From the outset, Duke publicly acknowledged Sean's parentage ambiguously. Privately, she vacillated between names and possibilities, caught in a tense mental labyrinth between her brief marriage to Michael Tell and her intense, widely scrutinized relationship with Desi Arnaz Junior. Each man had left his mark, and the media was swift to sense a story, launching speculation that would shadow Sean throughout his early years. Tabloids whispered that the child could be Arnaz Jr.'s, while gossip columns insisted Tell's brief union with Duke could have produced the boy. For Duke, every public appearance and interview became a minefield. By the time Sean was born, Aston had formed a bond with Duke that transcended romantic interest. He embraced the responsibility of fatherhood, stepping into a role that no legal document had yet mandated. In Los Angeles's celebrity circles, where paternity rumors could ignite reputations overnight, Aston's commitment was both stabilizing and strategic. He legally adopted Sean, and his presence offered Duke a measure of stability she had rarely experienced. Aston's decision was also a public shield, countering the swirling speculation with an image of a united, functioning family. The media, however, was relentless. Headlines screamed with calculated ambiguity. Is Sean Aston the son of Desi Arnaz Jr.? And Hollywood baby mystery. Who's the real father? Paparazzi camped outside hospitals and Duke's Los Angeles home, capturing fleeting moments of mother and child. Magazine features dissected her previous relationships, mapping timelines to suggest who could plausibly have fathered Sean. The pressure was omnipresent, every smile photographed and every public statement analyzed as though it were proof. Even as Duke sought privacy, the story of Sean's paternity had become a public puzzle, a mystery that Hollywood's gossip mill thrived upon. Amid the chaos, family life quietly continued. The birth of Duke's second son with Aston, Mackenzie Aston, in 1973, helped anchor the household in tangible reality. Mackenzie's arrival reinforced Aston's role as a devoted father and Duke's position as a mother, striving to maintain cohesion amidst ongoing speculation. The children, unaware of the swirling controversies, became a stabilizing force for their parents. As Sean grew, the ambiguity of his biological father persisted, though it never diluted the love he received from Aston. In interviews decades later, Duke acknowledged her uncertainty openly, framing it as a product of her youth and the extraordinary pressures of Hollywood life. For Sean, this created a complex legacy, a childhood defined by love and adoption, yet haunted by public speculation. Friends and industry insiders noted the unusual tension between private life and public curiosity, describing Duke as fiercely protective, navigating each day like a strategic chess game. His opponent was unseen. It was the relentless gossip machine. Growing questions and adult curiosity. Born on February 25, 1971, and raised in Los Angeles by John Aston and Patty Duke, young Sean was never shielded entirely from whispers. Even as a boy, he sensed the occasional tension in conversations between adults, the unspoken glances when names like Desi Arnaz Jr. or Michael Tell were mentioned. John Astin, steadfast and calm, filled the practical role of father. However, by adolescence, Sean's curiosity had grown sharper. While friends discussed sports, school, or weekend plans, Sean carried a subtler preoccupation: his lineage. The uncertainty surrounding his paternity, long a subdued household secret, now emerged as a source of both intrigue and subtle anxiety. Interviews and magazine articles had occasionally resurfaced old rumors, cataloging timelines and relationships, painting a puzzle that seemed half-complete. He understood the background story. As Sean reached adulthood, the questions that had hovered like shadows grew more insistent. Hollywood, which had once seemed a distant stage of rumor and celebrity gossip, now intersected directly with his identity. He sought clarity. Motivated by a desire for understanding rather than retribution, Sean approached each man involved in the chapter of his early life with measured respect. The process required discretion. Michael Tell, a relatively private figure after his brief 1970 marriage to Duke, was contacted cautiously, mindful of decades that had passed. Desi Arnaz Junior, whose fame in the 1960s and 1970s had brought additional scrutiny to the family, was approached with sensitivity, understanding the enduring impact of media speculation on his own life. John Astin remained central, both as a confidant and as the father figure who had shaped Sean's earliest memories. Astin's role, now decades long, had always been clear. He provided love and structure, a steady presence amidst the whirlwind of Hollywood publicity and personal uncertainty. Sean's inquiries were never about replacing Astin or challenging his role. Rather, they were a pursuit of facts, of the truth of biology as separate from the emotional reality of family. Each phone call or letter, each tentative discussion, was a step into a carefully navigated minefield of history and personal sensitivity. The men he contacted had long moved into very different phases of their lives. For Michael Tell, the contact reopened a chapter that had effectively been sealed for more than 3 decades. By then, he had lived largely outside the spotlight, far removed from the brief 1970 marriage to Patty Duke that had lasted only 13 days, yet continued to echo through public speculation. For Desi Arnaz Jr., the outreach landed differently. By the time Sean Astin reached out, he had already spent decades navigating life beyond the peak intensity of his early fame as the son of television legends Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. He had experienced the full arc of celebrity scrutiny early in life and had since shifted toward a more private existence. Sean approached each man with careful restraint, fully aware that these were not just factual inquiries, but emotional intersections with decades of lived experience. DNA test and the shocking truth. By the mid-1990s, Sean Astin had reached an age where the unanswered questions of his youth demanded resolution. He thus opted for DNA testing. The process was clinical. Blood samples, laboratory protocols, and forensic standards converged to produce an answer that, despite all speculation, would finally be irrefutable. In private, away from the glare of media scrutiny that had shadowed his mother's life and his own, he awaited the results that would rewrite a personal narrative long mired in ambiguity. The results arrived quietly, but carried seismic implications. Michael Tell, Patty Duke's brief husband in 1970, emerged as Sean's biological father. The confirmation was absolute. The revelation immediately clarified timelines that had long fueled speculation. The 13-day marriage, the pregnancy rumors, and the intricate overlap of relationships with Desi Arnaz Jr. and John Astin. For Sean, it was a moment of factual truth. Sean Astin's resolution of his paternity mystery did not dismantle the foundation of his identity. Long before DNA testing provided biological clarity, his sense of family had already been shaped by lived experience. At the center of that stability stood John Aston, the man who raised him from infancy, legally adopted him, and became the consistent paternal presence in a childhood otherwise marked by public scrutiny surrounding Patty Duke. Even after the revelation that his biological father was Michael Tell, Sean's emotional bond with John remained unchanged. The confirmation of Michael Tell as Sean's biological father introduced a second, quieter layer to his family narrative. Tell, who had spent much of his life outside the Hollywood spotlight after his brief 13-day marriage to Patty Duke in 1970, responded with restraint and privacy when contacted. Their connection developed gradually, without spectacle or public performance, shaped instead by mutual recognition of an unexpected biological link. Over time, their relationship formed within carefully defined boundaries. It was not a replacement of fatherhood, but an addition to an already established emotional framework. This dual reality reshaped decades of public speculation that had circulated through tabloids, biographies, and entertainment retrospectives. For years, inconsistent timelines and overlapping relationships involving Desi Arnaz Junior and others had fueled speculation about Sean's origins. Once DNA evidence provided clarity in the 1990s, those narratives collapsed under factual confirmation. The uncertainty that had followed him from childhood into adulthood was resolved without erasing the emotional bonds already formed. Instead, it reinforced them. He recognized that resolution did not require replacement, and that truth could coexist with continuity. In private reflection and public commentary, he consistently emphasized that the most meaningful relationships in his life had already been established long before any biological confirmation. As the years progressed into the early 2000s, Sean expanded this understanding into a broader philosophy of family. He openly described having three paternal influences: John Aston as his father in every meaningful lived sense, Michael Tell as his biological father, and the enduring influence of Patty Duke as the emotional and cultural center of his upbringing. In interviews around the release and success of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Sean Astin spoke very directly about how he understood fatherhood after learning the truth about his biological parentage. In a widely cited 2001 interview with People magazine, he did not reduce his experience to a simple revelation about DNA. Instead, he emphasized that the man who raised him, John Astin, was his father in every meaningful sense that shaped his life. He explained that fatherhood, in his view, is defined by presence. Who shows up, who provides structure, who is there for the everyday moments of childhood rather than an abstract genetic connection. He described the importance of consistency rather than someone defined only by biological linkage. Fatherhood, to him, was not a moment of origin, but a sustained pattern of care. Another point he made in that 2001 conversation, and in similar discussions, was about emotional investment. He described fatherhood as being present not just physically, but also emotionally engaged in a child's life. That meant celebrating achievements, providing comfort during setbacks, and maintaining a stable sense of belonging. In Sean's view, this emotional labor was what ultimately creates a father-child bond. Without it, biology alone did not carry the same weight in defining family. Patty Duke's legacy remained inseparable from this framework. Her achievements, including her 1963 Academy Award for The Miracle Worker and her iconic role in The Patty Duke Show, were always interwoven with her struggles with mental health and the pressures of early fame. Sean consistently spoke about her experiences not as tabloid material, but as lived reality shaped by undiagnosed bipolar disorder and the intense scrutiny of Hollywood in the 1960s and 70s. He also turned his personal history into advocacy work, supporting the Patty Duke Mental Health Initiative in 2003 to raise awareness and reduce stigma around bipolar disorder. At the same time, he built a global acting career through The Lord of the Rings, while maintaining a grounded identity shaped by family, ultimately embracing a balanced sense of self. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.